October 15th, 2023. My wife laughed in my face at our dinner party, telling our closest friends I was too weak to ever walk away from her disrespect. What she didn't know was that I had divorce papers folded in my jacket pocket, and her lawyer had already signed off on the settlement that morning. Want to know what happened when I pulled them out right there at the table? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I should have known something was off when Rebecca insisted we host the dinner party that Saturday night. She'd been distant for months, her phone constantly buzzing with notifications she'd quickly silence whenever I walked into the room. But that evening, she was animated in a way I hadn't seen in years, laughing too loud, touching my shoulder with exaggerated affection whenever our guests looked our way. We'd invited 3 couples from our social circle. Marcus and Jennifer Chen had been our friends since college. Then there was Derek Powell and his wife Amanda, who lived 2 blocks down in our Chicago suburb of Naperville. The last couple was Travis and Sarah Mitchell, Rebecca's co-workers from the marketing firm downtown where she'd been, working late practically every night for the past 6 months. The dining room glowed with candlelight as Rebecca brought out her famous braised short ribs. Everyone complimented the presentation, the wine selection, the autumn centerpiece she'd spent all afternoon arranging. I played my role perfectly, the attentive husband, refilling glasses and laughing at the right moments. But my jacket hung on the coat rack by the front door, and inside the left pocket sat a manila envelope that would change everything. "Daniel's always been so supportive of my career," Rebecca announced suddenly, her wine glass raised in what seemed like a toast. Her words had that slight slur that came after her 3rd glass of Cabernet. "Even when I have to work those long nights, he never complains. He just waits at home like a good little—" She stopped herself, but the damage was done. The table went quiet except for the soft jazz playing from our Sonos speaker. "Like a good little what, babe?" I asked, keeping my voice even. Rebecca's smile widened, and I saw something cruel flash in her hazel eyes, something I'd been pretending not to notice for too long. "Oh, come on, Danny. Everyone here knows you'd never actually do anything about it. You're too comfortable." "Too safe." Jennifer Chen shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Marcus cleared his throat and suddenly became very interested in his short ribs. But Travis Mitchell, Rebecca's colleague, had this knowing smirk on his face that told me everything I needed to know about those late nights at the office. "Rebecca, maybe we should—" Amanda Powell started, but my wife cut her off. No, it's fine. We're all friends here, right?" Rebecca leaned back in her chair, gesturing with her wine glass so carelessly that drops of red wine splashed onto our white tablecloth. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Daniel's predictable, safe. He'd never leave this house, this life, this marriage. He doesn't have it in him." She turned to look directly at me, and for a moment I saw genuine contempt in her expression. "You know what your problem is, Danny? You're too loyal, too forgiving. You let people walk all over you because you're terrified of being alone. That's why you'll never—" "Never what?" I asked quietly. "Never leave," she said, pronouncing each word with deliberate slowness. "You will never leave me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Sarah Mitchell was staring at her plate like she wanted to disappear into it. Derek Powell had his hand on Amanda's arm, probably signaling that they should leave. But nobody moved. They were all frozen, watching this private humiliation play out in real time. Rebecca laughed, actually laughed, and took another sip of wine. "See, he's not even denying it. That's what I love about you, Danny. You're so manageable." I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Every eye in the room followed me as I walked to the coat rack. My hands were steady as I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the envelope. 3 weeks of planning, 2 meetings with my attorney Patricia Hendricks, and 1 very thorough investigation by a private detective named Frank Russo had led to this moment. "You're absolutely right about one thing. Rebecca," I said, walking back to the table, "I am loyal. I am forgiving, and I have been terrified terrified of admitting that the woman I married 10 years ago doesn't exist anymore. I placed the envelope on the table in front of her, right next to her wine glass. "What's this?" she asked, but her voice had lost that mocking edge. There was uncertainty now, maybe even the first flicker of fear. "Divorce papers," I said calmly. "Filed 3 days ago. Your attorney, Mitchell Brennan from Sorensen and Associates, signed off on the initial settlement this morning at 9:15. I know Mitchell's your guy because you've been texting him about it for the past 2 months, thinking I had no idea you'd been planning your own exit strategy." Rebecca's face went pale. She grabbed the envelope and tore it open, her hands shaking now as she scanned the documents inside. "The thing is," I continued, addressing not just her but everyone at the table, "you were so busy planning to leave me that you didn't notice I'd been documenting everything. Every late-night work session with Travis over there. Every hotel receipt you thought you'd hidden. Every text message you deleted from your phone, but not from the cloud backup." Travis Mitchell's smirk had vanished completely. Sarah was staring at her husband with an expression of dawning horror. "I hired Frank Russo, one of the best private investigators in Illinois, and he's very thorough. Photos, timestamps, witness statements from hotel staff who recognized you both. It's all attached to the petition, Rebecca. Everything." My wife was shaking her head, flipping through page after page. "You can't. We can talk about this. We don't need to talk." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You just spent the last 10 minutes mocking me in front of our friends, telling everyone how pathetic and predictable I am. You told them I'd never leave. Well, surprise." I looked around at our guests, who were all staring at the table like they wished they could sink through the floor. "I apologize that you all had to witness this. It wasn't my plan to do it in front of everyone. But Rebecca made her choice about how this evening would go." "Daniel, please," Rebecca whispered. And for the first time in months, I heard something genuine in her voice. "We can fix this. Counseling, therapy, whatever you want. Just don't what?" I asked, echoing her words from minutes earlier. "Don't leave?" "See, that's where you miscalculated, Rebecca. You assumed my kindness was a weakness. You mistook patience for stupidity. And you bet everything on the belief that I loved you too much to walk away." I picked up my own wine glass and drained it in one long swallow. "You're right about one thing, though. I do love you, or at least I loved who I thought you were. But I love myself more than I love a lie." The dining room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. Rebecca was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. Maybe that was the saddest part, realizing that somewhere along the way she'd killed whatever feelings I had left. "The papers explain everything," I said. "You can keep the house. I've already moved my things to a condo in downtown Chicago. I'm keeping my retirement accounts and my car. You get yours. We split the joint savings 50-50. No alimony because, well," I glanced at Travis, "Illinois doesn't look kindly on infidelity and divorce proceedings." I grabbed my jacket from the coat rack and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear Rebecca sobbing, chairs scraping as our guests awkwardly tried to figure out whether to stay or go. "Where are you going?" Rebecca called out, her voice breaking. I turned back one last time. "Anywhere but here. Enjoy your dinner party." As I stepped out into the cool October night, I heard the first sounds of chaos erupting behind me. Sarah Mitchell's raised voice, Rebecca's protests, the crash of something falling. But I kept walking to my car, got in, and drove away from that house for the last time. My phone started buzzing before I even made it to the end of our street. Text messages from Marcus, from Derek, even one from Jennifer saying, "I'm so sorry, we had no idea." But there was one message I'd been waiting for, from Patricia Hendricks, my attorney. "Papers served. Clock starts now. You did the right thing." I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt free. The condo I'd rented was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower overlooking Lake Michigan. I'd signed the lease 2 weeks earlier, back when Rebecca thought I was attending a conference in Milwaukee. The furniture was minimal, a leather couch, a bed, a desk facing the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was the opposite of the cluttered suburban house we'd filled with 10 years of memories and lies. I poured myself a bourbon and sat in the darkness, watching the city lights reflect off the black water. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. 37 missed calls, 62 text messages. Most were from Rebecca, progressing from anger to bargaining to desperation. A few were from our dinner guests, awkwardly trying to process what they'd witnessed. But there was one call I needed to make. My brother Ethan answered on the second ring. "Danny, it's almost midnight. Everything okay?" "I did it," I said simply. There was a pause, then a long exhale. "You served her the papers?" "At the dinner party. In front of everyone." "Jesus Christ," Ethan laughed, not cruelly, but with genuine surprise. "I thought you were going to wait until Monday, do it quietly through the lawyers." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. So did I, but she decided tonight was the perfect time to humiliate me in front of our friends. Told everyone I was too weak to ever leave her, that I was predictable and pathetic. I took a sip of bourbon, feeling the burn slide down my throat. So I proved her wrong. How'd she take it? About as well as you'd expect. The crying started the moment she opened the envelope and saw her affair documented in legal terms. Ethan whistled low. Frank Russo came through. Every detail. Hotel receipts, photographs, text message logs. Travis Mitchell's going to have an interesting conversation with his wife tonight. Good, Ethan said firmly. My younger brother had never liked Rebecca, not since she'd deliberately excluded him from our wedding planning because she thought he was too blue-collar for her vision. Ethan was a union electrician who made good money, but that wasn't enough for Rebecca's social climbing ambitions. You deserve better than someone who treats you like a doormat. I know. And I did know, intellectually. But emotionally, that was going to take time. We talked for another 20 minutes before I let him go. He offered to drive up from Springfield, but I told him I needed space to process everything. What I didn't tell him was that I felt hollow, like I'd spent so much energy preparing for this moment that now that it had arrived, I didn't know what to do with myself. Sleep didn't come until almost 4 in the morning, and when it did, it was restless and full of fragmented dreams. Sunday morning arrived with grey clouds and the promise of rain. I made coffee in my new kitchen, the silence of the condo almost oppressive after years of Rebecca's constant presence. No morning news show blaring from the TV. No passive-aggressive comments about how I'd loaded the dishwasher wrong. Just quiet. My phone showed 114 notifications. I scrolled through them mechanically while sipping coffee that tasted like cardboard. Rebecca had sent a novel's worth of text messages between midnight and 6 a.m. They followed a predictable pattern. Denial, blame-shifting, promises to change, threats about what her lawyer would do, more promises, and finally, desperate pleas for me to just talk to her face-to-face. I deleted them all without responding. Marcus Chen had sent a thoughtful message. Man, I don't know what to say, except I'm sorry you've been dealing with this alone. If you need anything, call me. No judgment, no questions. Jennifer had sent something similar, adding that she'd always thought something was off, but hadn't wanted to interfere in our marriage. Derek and Amanda Powell had sent a joint message saying they were here for me and asking if I needed help with anything. Practical, moving stuff, legal recommendations, or just someone to grab a beer with. But the message that caught my attention was from Sarah Mitchell. I'm filing for divorce, too. Thank you for having the courage I didn't. Travis admitted everything when we got home. I hope you find peace. I stared at that message for a long time. I hadn't intended to blow up someone else's marriage, but I also couldn't feel guilty about exposing the truth. Travis and Rebecca had made their choices. Sarah and I were just the collateral damage who'd finally decided to stop accepting it. Around noon, Patricia Hendricks called. How are you holding up? She asked, her professional tone softened with genuine concern. I'm functioning, I replied. That's about all we can ask for right now. I wanted to give you a heads up. Rebecca's attorney called my office 3 times already this morning. She's panicking because the documentation we have is ironclad. Mitchell Brennan is suggesting she accept the settlement terms as filed. What's Rebecca saying? She wants to negotiate. She's claiming the affair wasn't that serious and that the division of assets is unfair. Patricia paused. Daniel, I need to be straight with you. She's going to fight this. Not because she loves you or wants to reconcile, but because her ego can't handle losing control of the narrative. Let her fight, I said quietly. I have time and documentation. She has lies and excuses. Good, that's the attitude we need. I'll keep you posted on any developments. Try to rest this weekend. Tomorrow, things are going to get complicated. She wasn't wrong. Monday morning, I was back at work. Grant & Associates, the architectural firm where I'd been a senior designer for 8 years. Walking into the office felt surreal, like I was moving through a dream. Everyone knew. The grapevine in our social circle had worked faster than any internet connection. My boss, Leonard Grant, called me into his office before I even reached my desk. Heard you had an eventful weekend, he said, gesturing for me to sit. You could say that. Leonard was in his 60s, divorced twice, and had seen enough office drama to write a book. Look, I'm not going to pry into your personal life, but I need to know, is this going to affect your work? No, I said firmly. If anything, I'll probably be here more. Not much reason to rush home these days. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. The Riverside Plaza project needs your attention this week. Think you can handle it? Absolutely. Work became my anchor over the next few days. I threw myself into designs and client meetings, staying at the office until 8 or 9 each night. The alternative was going back to that empty condo and staring at the lake while my phone exploded with increasingly unhinged messages from Rebecca. On Wednesday, she showed up at my office. I was in the middle of a conference call when our receptionist, Gloria, knocked urgently on my door. She held up a note. Your wife is in the lobby. She won't leave. I muted my call. Tell her I'm busy and she needs to contact my attorney. Gloria looked uncomfortable. She's causing a scene, Daniel. She's crying and saying she needs to talk to you. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. I'll be right there. The lobby of Grant & Associates was modern and professional, all glass and chrome and carefully curated art. Rebecca looked completely out of place. Her eyes red and swollen, her designer clothes wrinkled like she'd slept in them. Danny, please, she said the moment she saw me. Several of my co-workers had found reasons to be in the lobby, pretending to check their mail or fill their coffee cups. I just need 5 minutes. No, I said calmly. You need to leave. Anything you want to say goes through our attorneys, but I love you. Her voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. It was a mistake, all of it. Travis meant nothing. I was stupid and scared and mocking me in front of our friends. Telling everyone I was too weak to leave. Was that also a mistake? She flinched like I'd slapped her. I was drunk. I didn't mean it. Yes, you did. I kept my voice level, aware of our audience. Drunk words are sober thoughts, Rebecca. You meant every word, and the only reason you're here now is because you're facing consequences for the first time in your life. That's not fair. What's not fair, I interrupted, is that I wasted 10 years on someone who saw me as a safety net instead of a partner. What's not fair is that you're more upset about being exposed than you are about what you actually did. And what's definitely not fair is you showing up at my workplace, trying to manipulate me into feeling sorry for you. Rebecca's expression shifted from desperate to angry in an instant. Fine, you want to play it this way? My lawyer says we can drag this out for years. I'll make sure you don't see a dime of, your lawyer already told you to accept the settlement, I said quietly, because he knows we have documentation of everything. Photos of you and Travis at the Sheraton. Text messages where you called me a useful idiot. Bank statements showing you withdrew $5,000 from our joint account last month to spend on a weekend trip to Wisconsin with him. Her face went pale. Accept the settlement, Rebecca. Sign the papers and move on. Because the longer you fight this, the more embarrassing details become public record. I turned and walked back toward my office, leaving her standing in the lobby. Behind me, I heard Gloria firmly but politely asking her to leave the building. Back at my desk, my hands were shaking. Confrontation had never been my strength, but something had shifted inside me that night at the dinner party. I wasn't the same person who'd accepted crumbs and called it a feast. That evening, Patricia called with news. Rebecca's accepting the settlement terms. Mitchell Brennan sent over the signed documents an hour ago. I sat down heavily on my couch, staring out at the darkening lake. Just like that? Just like that. She realizes she has no leverage. We'll finalize everything in court next month, but effectively it's done. Okay, I said, though the word felt inadequate for the moment. Daniel, you did good. You stood up for yourself. That takes courage. After we hung up, I poured myself another bourbon and stood at the window. The city stretched out below me, millions of lights representing millions of lives. Somewhere out there, Rebecca was probably calling her friends, spinning some version of events where she was the victim. Travis was probably dealing with his own divorce. And I was here, alone but finally free. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I could breathe. 3 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, client meetings, and learning how to be alone again. The condo stopped feeling temporary and started feeling like home. I bought actual furniture, a dining table, bookshelves, art for the walls. Small acts of claiming space that was entirely mine. The court date was set for November 18th, just a formality since Rebecca had accepted the settlement. Patricia assured me it would be quick and painless as far as these things went. What surprised me most was how many people reached out during those weeks. Marcus and Jennifer invited me to dinner. Not a pity dinner, just casual pizza and board games like we used to do in college. Derek Powell asked if I wanted to join his weekly basketball game at the community center. Even people from work, colleagues I'd barely spoken to beyond project discussions, sent kind messages or stopped by my office to check in, but the most unexpected connection came from Sarah Mitchell. She'd sent a few messages after that first one, mostly about practical divorce questions, since we were both navigating the same waters. Then about 2 weeks after the dinner party, she asked if I wanted to grab coffee. We met at a small cafe in Oak Park, neutral territory away from Naperville and the gossip mill that had been churning since that Saturday night. Sarah looked different than she had at the dinner party. Less polished maybe, but more real. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of the designer outfit she'd worn to our house. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, stirring her latte nervously. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to, given everything. Why wouldn't I?" I asked because I'm married to the guy who... She stopped, shaking her head. Was married to. The papers were finalized yesterday. That was fast. Travis didn't fight it. I think he was relieved, honestly. Turns out Rebecca wasn't his first affair. Just the one that finally got caught. She laughed bitterly. I'd been making excuses for years. Late work nights, business trips that lasted too long, the constant phone checking. I knew something was wrong, but I convinced myself I was being paranoid. I recognized that feeling. It's easier to believe the lies than face the truth. Exactly. Sarah took a sip of her coffee. When you handed Rebecca those papers at dinner, something clicked for me. I realized I'd been waiting for permission to leave, like I needed proof it was bad enough to justify walking away. You didn't need my permission, I said gently. I know. But watching you stand up for yourself gave me courage to do the same. She met my eyes. So thank you. We talked for over an hour, sharing war stories about lawyers and asset division and the strange limbo of divorce proceedings. It wasn't romantic. We were both too raw, too recently wounded. But it was comfortable, talking to someone who understood exactly what this felt like. As we were leaving, Sarah paused at her car. Some friends and I are going to see a comedy show downtown Friday night. Nothing fancy, just drinks and laughs. You should come. I don't know. As friends, she clarified quickly. No pressure, no expectations. Just people having a normal night out. You can't spend every evening alone in that condo. She was right, of course. Okay, text me the details. Friday night, I found myself at a comedy club in Lincoln Park with Sarah and 4 of her friends, none of whom I'd met before, which was a relief. No shared history, no awkward knowledge of my failed marriage. Just new people who saw me as Daniel, not as that guy whose wife cheated. The comedian was mediocre at best, but the company was good. Sarah's friend Nicole worked in publishing and had stories about absurd author demands. Her husband Kevin was a high school teacher with an endless supply of teenage drama. It was normal, refreshingly, wonderfully normal. When the show ended, Sarah walked me to my car. "Thanks for coming," she said. "You didn't look miserable, which I'm counting as a win." I wasn't miserable, I admitted. It was actually nice. Good, because we're doing trivia next Wednesday at O'Malley's if you're interested. Over the next few weeks, I found myself slowly building a new life. Not replacing the old one, but constructing something different. Wednesday trivia nights became a regular thing. Marcus and I started meeting for breakfast before work on Thursdays. I joined Derek's basketball game and discovered I was terrible at free throws, but decent at defense. Work remained steady. The Riverside Plaza project was nearly complete, and Leonard had assigned me to lead the design for a new residential complex in Evanston. The irony wasn't lost on me, designing homes for other people while my own had just fallen apart. November 18th arrived grey and cold, typical Chicago autumn weather. I put on my best suit and met Patricia at the courthouse downtown. Rebecca was already there with Mitchell Brennan, sitting on a bench outside the courtroom. She looked thin, her face gaunt in a way that made me wonder if she was eating. Our eyes met briefly. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but I looked away. There was nothing left to say. The hearing lasted exactly 12 minutes. Judge Catherine Morrison reviewed the settlement, asked us both a series of standard questions, and signed the decree. 10 years of marriage dissolved in less time than it took to watch a sitcom episode. "How do you feel?" Patricia asked as we walked out of the courthouse. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Relieved? Sad? Empty? All of the above is pretty normal." She stopped at the courthouse steps. "You did the right thing, Daniel. I know it doesn't feel like a victory, but you stood up for yourself when it mattered. That's worth something." I shook her hand and thanked her for everything. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with messages. "Ethan, is it done?" Marcus, "Drinks tonight?" Jennifer, "Thinking of you today." But there was one message that made me pause. From Sarah, "Coffee later if you need to talk." Or don't talk. Whatever helps. I found myself driving to that same cafe in Oak Park. Sarah was already there, 2 lattes waiting on the table. "So?" she asked simply. "So it's done. Officially divorced as of 11:43 this morning." She raised her cup. "To new beginnings?" I clinked my cup against hers. "To new beginnings." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching people hurry past the window with their own lives and problems and triumphs. "Can I tell you something weird?" Sarah said eventually. "Sure. I don't miss him. Travis, I thought I would. We were together for 7 years. But mostly I just feel lighter, like I've been carrying something heavy and finally put it down." "I get that," I said. And I did. The sadness I felt wasn't for Rebecca or our marriage. It was for the time lost, the person I'd allowed myself to become while trying to make someone else happy. "What are you going to do now?" she asked. "Keep working. Keep showing up to trivia night. Maybe learn to cook something other than scrambled eggs." I smiled. "What about you?" "I'm thinking about going back to school. I always wanted to get my master's in education, but Travis thought it was a waste of money." She shrugged. "Turns out when you're not funding someone else's affair, you have a lot more disposable income." We both laughed at that. Dark humor born from shared experience. Over the next month, life settled into new rhythms. Thanksgiving came, and instead of the elaborate dinner Rebecca used to insist on hosting, I went to Ethan's house in Springfield. His wife Angela made a turkey that was slightly dry, and their twin daughters told me knock-knock jokes that made no sense. It was chaotic and imperfect and wonderful. December brought snow and holiday parties at work. I went to most of them, no longer the guy who left early to get home to his wife. I stayed late, talked to colleagues I'd barely known, even accepted an invitation to go ice skating at Millennium Park with Nicole and Kevin's group. Sarah was there too. We'd been spending more time together, still just friends. But the kind of friends who texted each other random thoughts at midnight and sent stupid memes and genuinely enjoyed each other's company. "You look happy," she observed as we wobbled around the ice rink. Both of us clutching the rail like our lives depended on it. "I think I am," I realized. "Not every day, not consistently. But yeah, mostly happy." "Me too," she smiled, and there was something peaceful in her expression. It's strange how leaving something that was making you miserable can feel like the hardest and best decision at the same time. As Christmas approached, I found myself reflecting on the past few months. That dinner party in October felt like it had happened to a different person. The Daniel who'd sat at that table, absorbing insults and contempt, seemed like a stranger now. I'd learned something important. Self-respect wasn't something you found, it was something you chose. Every day, in small ways and large ones, you either honored your own worth or betrayed it. Standing at my condo window on Christmas Eve, watching snow fall over Lake Michigan, I raised a glass of bourbon to the empty room. "Do not settling," I said out loud. To know when to walk away. To second chances and new chapters. The city lights twinkled below. Each one a reminder that life was full of possibilities if you were brave enough to reach for them. And for the first time in years, I was ready to do exactly that. January brought bitter cold and a fresh slate. New year, new life. The cliché felt appropriate for once. Leonard had promoted me to lead architect on the Evanston project, which came with a salary bump and an office with better natural light. Small victories, but they added up. The trivia team had evolved into a genuine friend group. Wednesday nights at O'Malley's were sacred now. Me, Sarah, Nicole, Kevin, and two new additions. Rachel, a surgeon with a dark sense of humor, and Ben, a software developer who knew more useless facts than anyone I'd ever met. We'd won exactly once, and only because the final category was 1980s architecture. "You carried us," Sarah had said, laughing as Ben collected our $50 gift certificate. Finally. "My career is useful for something," I joked back. Life had found a comfortable rhythm. Not exciting, maybe, but stable, peaceful. I was learning to appreciate boring in a way I never had when my marriage was imploding. Then February arrived, and with it, complications. I was at Whole Foods on a Saturday morning, debating between two different kinds of coffee beans, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Daniel?" "Oh my God, Daniel." I turned to find Vanessa Rodriguez, Rebecca's younger sister, staring at me with wide eyes. We'd always gotten along well. She was nothing like Rebecca, more grounded and genuine. But I hadn't spoken to her since before the divorce was finalized. "Vanessa, hey." I set down the coffee, suddenly aware of how awkward this was. "I've been meaning to reach out," she said quickly. "I wanted to apologize for everything. What Rebecca did was inexcusable, and I'm so sorry you got hurt. You don't need to apologize for your sister's choices." "I know. But still." She shifted her shopping basket from one arm to the other. "Can we grab coffee?" "Like right now?" "There's a Starbucks in the plaza." 20 minutes later, we were sitting by the window with overpriced lattes, while Vanessa explained that she'd stopped speaking to Rebecca after learning the full extent of what had happened. "She tried to spin it like you blindsided her, like you were the villain," Vanessa said, anger flashing in her dark eyes. "But I talked to Jennifer Chen. She told me what really happened at that dinner party. What Rebecca said to you. Jennifer shouldn't have. I'm glad she did. Someone needed to tell me the truth." Vanessa wrapped her hands around her cup. "Rebecca's always been selfish, but I never thought she'd be cruel. The way she treated you, the public humiliation. I was ashamed to share DNA with her. How is she?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. Vanessa sighed. "Not great. She lost her job at the marketing firm. Turns out sleeping with a colleague violated their ethics policy. She's living with our parents in Schaumburg, and from what Mom says, she's spiraling. Drinking too much, not taking care of herself. I should have felt something, satisfaction, pity, concern. But there was just numbness. That's unfortunate. Is it weird that I don't feel bad for her? Vanessa asked quietly. She made her choices. She has to live with them. We talked for another hour. Vanessa was getting her MBA at Northwestern while working full-time at a non-profit. She'd recently ended her own relationship after realizing her boyfriend was more interested in her family's money than in her. We swapped stories about starting over and rediscovering who we were outside of failed relationships. You seem good, she observed. Like genuinely good. Happier than I remember. I am good, I said, realizing it was true. It took a while, but yeah. I'm in a better place. Before we parted ways, Vanessa gave me her number. Stay in touch. I know it's weird because of Rebecca, but I always liked you. You were the best thing that happened to our family. Even if my sister was too stupid to appreciate it, the encounter left me thoughtful. I hadn't expected to feel so indifferent about Rebecca's struggles. A year ago, I would have been crushed to hear she was suffering. Now, it was just information. No emotional charge attached. That evening, I mentioned the encounter to Sarah during our now regular Saturday dinner routine. We'd fallen into a pattern of cooking at each other's apartments, splitting the grocery costs and enjoying the casual domesticity of it. Tonight was my turn to cook. I was attempting chicken piccata, which was either going to be delicious or a disaster. So Vanessa wants to stay friends with you? Sarah asked, chopping tomatoes for the salad. She'd gotten comfortable in my kitchen, knew where I kept the good knives and the cutting boards, apparently. Is that weird? Maybe a little, but also nice. She scraped the tomatoes into the bowl. She's not responsible for her sister's actions. If you like her as a person, why not? I flipped the chicken, trying to keep the breading intact. I guess I'm worried about accidentally getting information about Rebecca, like Vanessa might feel obligated to update me or something. Then set boundaries. Tell her you're glad to be friends, but you'd prefer not to discuss Rebecca. Sarah grabbed the olive oil from the counter. You're allowed to protect your peace, Daniel. You don't owe anyone access to your emotional space. She was right, as usual. Sarah had a clarity about boundaries that came from years of ignoring her own. Now we both practiced saying no, setting limits, choosing ourselves first. It was revolutionary. The chicken piccata turned out edible, which we considered a major victory. We ate dinner while watching some mindless action movie, offering commentary on the implausible plot and terrible dialogue. Next Saturday, we're ordering pizza, Sarah declared. I can't handle another cooking experiment. Hey, this was good. This was acceptable. There's a difference. I threw a pillow at her. She threw it back. It was easy, this friendship. Uncomplicated in a way. My marriage never had been. March brought unexpected news at work. Leonard called me into his office with an unusual expression, somewhere between excited and apologetic. How would you feel about spending 6 months in Seattle? He asked without preamble. I blinked. Seattle? We're partnering with a firm out there on a major development project, mixed-use complex, residential and commercial. They specifically requested you after seeing your work on Riverside Plaza. He leaned back in his chair. It's a huge opportunity, Daniel. Career-defining stuff. But it would mean relocating temporarily, starting in May. My mind raced. Seattle. 6 months. Away from Chicago, from the life I'd carefully rebuilt, from the people who'd helped me put the pieces back together. Can I think about it? Of course. Take a week, talk it over with. Well, whoever you need to talk it over with. That night I called Ethan first. My brother's response was immediate. Hell yes, take it. When are you ever going to get an opportunity like this again? Marcus was equally enthusiastic. Dude, it's Seattle. Amazing food scene, beautiful city, and it's not like you have anything tying you down here anymore. But it was Sarah's response I was most curious about. We met for coffee, that same Oak Park cafe that had become our unofficial meeting spot. Seattle, she said, stirring sugar into her latte. Wow, it's only 6 months. I'd be back in November. That's a long time. Something flickered across her face, but it was gone before I could identify it. But it sounds like an incredible opportunity. You think I should go? Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching the steam rise from her cup. I think you should do what's best for your career and your future. You've worked hard to get to this point. Don't hold yourself back. But I pressed, sensing there was more. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. No buts. I'm happy for you, Daniel, really. We talked about logistics, subletting the condo, what the project would involve, whether Seattle's coffee really was better than Chicago's. But there was a weight to the conversation that hadn't been there before, an awareness of how much our friendship had come to mean in the past few months. Walking back to my car, I realized something that caught me completely off guard. I didn't want to leave, not because I was afraid of the opportunity, but because I'd finally built something here worth staying for. That night, staring out at Lake Michigan, I thought about the person I'd been a year ago. The man who'd sat at that dinner table absorbing insults, too afraid of change to stand up for himself. The Daniel would have turned down Seattle, would have made himself smaller to avoid risk. But I wasn't that person anymore. The question wasn't whether I could handle Seattle. It was whether I was ready to choose ambition over comfort, growth over stability. Whether the life I'd built in Chicago was a foundation or a hiding place. I had a week to decide, but something told me I already knew the answer. Sunday morning, I called Leonard. I'll do it, I said. I'll go to Seattle. There was satisfaction in his voice when he responded. Excellent choice, Daniel. This is going to be big for you. After we hung up, I texted the group chat. Big news. Calling an emergency trivia session for tonight. O'Malley's at 7. The responses came quickly. Ben, this better be good. Rachel, I'll be there. Nicole, intrigued. Kevin, bringing extra snacks. Sarah's response came last. Just 3 words, see you there. As I got ready to meet them, I felt the familiar flutter of anxiety mixed with excitement. Change was coming again, but this time I was choosing it. That made all the difference. The old Daniel had change forced upon him. The new Daniel walked toward it with his eyes open, knowing that sometimes the scariest decisions led to the best outcomes. Seattle was waiting. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to see what came next. O'Malley's was crowded for a Sunday night. The usual mix of sports fans and regulars nursing beers while pretending to care about whatever game was on the screens. Our group had claimed our usual table in the back corner, away from the noise. I waited until everyone had their drinks before dropping the news. So, I'm moving to Seattle for 6 months. Starting in May, the reactions were mixed. Ben raised his glass immediately. Congrats, man. That's huge. Rachel nodded approvingly, already asking questions about the project. Nicole looked genuinely sad. We're going to have to find someone else who actually knows architecture trivia. Kevin squeezed her hand. We'll survive, barely. But I was watching Sarah, who'd gone very still. Her fingers wrapped tight around her beer bottle. It's temporary, I added. Though I wasn't sure why, I felt the need to clarify. I'll be back in November. 6 months isn't that long, Sarah said, but her voice was careful, controlled. You'll be back before you know it. The conversation moved on. Ben started debating the best Seattle restaurants. Rachel shared a story about a conference she'd attended there. But Sarah remained quiet, occasionally smiling at the right moments, but clearly somewhere else, mentally. When the group started breaking up around 9:30, I caught Sarah's arm as she reached for her jacket. Walk with me? We ended up at the lakefront despite the cold. The water was black and restless, reflecting the city lights in fractured patterns. We walked in silence for a while, our breath forming clouds in the frigid air. You're upset, I finally said. I'm not upset, Sarah. She stopped walking, shoving her hands deep in her coat pockets. Okay, maybe I am, but I have no right to be. This is an amazing opportunity for you, and I'm genuinely happy about it. I'm just also sad. Is that allowed? Of course it's allowed. We've gotten close these past few months, she continued, staring out at the water. Really close. And I know we said we were just friends, and we are, but... She trailed off, shaking her head. Never mind. Forget I said anything. But what? I pressed gently. Sarah turned to look at me, and in the dim light from the street lamps, I could see the conflict in her expression. But I think I've been lying to myself about what this is. What we are. My heart kicked against my ribs. What do you think we are? More than friends, she whispered. At least that's what it feels like to me. But maybe I'm reading this completely wrong, and if I am, just tell me now so I can... I kissed her. It wasn't planned, wasn't something I'd consciously decided to do. But suddenly her words were hanging in the frozen air between us, and closing the distance was the only response that made sense. She kissed me back, her cold hands coming up to frame my face. When we finally broke apart, we were both slightly breathless. So, she said shakily. Not reading it wrong then? Not even a little bit. We stood there on the lakefront, foreheads pressed together, neither of us quite believing what had just happened. This complicates things, Sarah said eventually. Yeah, you're leaving in 6 weeks. Yeah, and we're both barely divorced and probably shouldn't be jumping into anything serious. Probably not. I agreed. She pulled back to look at me properly. But I don't want to pretend this isn't happening. I don't want to waste time being careful when life's already wasted enough of our time. So what do we do? I don't know. She laughed, and it was genuine despite the uncertainty. Maybe we figure it out as we go. See where this leads without overthinking it? I can do that, I said, pulling her closer. I'm pretty good at taking things one day at a time now. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and unexpected joy. Sarah and I didn't put a label on what we were. It was too new, too fragile, too complicated with Seattle looming. But we spent almost every evening together, cooking dinner and watching movies, talking until midnight about everything and nothing. It was different from what I'd had with Rebecca. Lighter somehow, despite both of us carrying the weight of failed marriages. We laughed more, argued less. And when we did disagree, we actually listened to each other instead of just waiting for our turn to talk. You know what's weird? Sarah said one night in late April. We were in my condo, half-packed boxes scattered around, takeout containers on the coffee table. I feel like I know you better after 4 months than I knew Travis after 7 years. Maybe that says more about Travis than about us. Maybe, or maybe it says something about what happens when two people are actually honest with each other from the start. She had a point. We'd begun this friendship in the wreckage of our marriages, with nothing to hide and no illusions to maintain. There was freedom in that kind of transparency. The day before I left for Seattle, Vanessa called. We'd stayed in touch since that grocery store encounter, meeting for coffee every few weeks. She'd become a genuine friend, separate from any connection to Rebecca. I wanted to catch you before you left, she said. And to tell you something you probably don't want to hear. Should I be worried? Rebecca's in rehab. Mom and Dad finally convinced her to check into a facility in Arizona. 30 days, maybe longer depending on how it goes. I sat down on one of my packed boxes. Is she okay? She will be, hopefully. The drinking got bad after she lost her job. But she's taking it seriously this time. Started therapy, working the program. Vanessa paused. She asked me to tell you she's sorry for everything. Vanessa, I told her not to contact you directly, that you'd moved on and she needed to respect that. But she wanted you to know. After we hung up, I sat in my half-empty condo processing the information. A year ago, news of Rebecca's struggles would have destroyed me, might have even made me question whether I'd done the right thing. But now, I hope she got better genuinely. Not because I wanted her back or even wanted a relationship with her, but because everyone deserved the chance to heal. That night, Sarah came over for our last evening together before Seattle. We ordered from the Italian place we'd gone to on our unofficial first date, ate on the floor, since I'd already shipped most of my furniture. 6 months, she said, twirling pasta on her fork. That's November. I'll visit. You can visit. It's not like I'm moving to another planet. I know. She set down her fork. I'm going to miss you anyway. I'm going to miss you too. We cleaned up dinner in comfortable silence, both of us avoiding the goodbye that was coming. Finally, around midnight, Sarah grabbed her jacket. At the door, she turned back. Daniel, thank you. For what? For showing me what it looks like when someone chooses themselves. That night at your dinner party, when you handed Rebecca those papers, that changed my life. You changed my life. You did that yourself. Maybe. But I needed to see it was possible first. She kissed me softly. Go to Seattle. Do amazing work. Build whatever you need to build. I'll be here when you get back. And then, she smiled, and then we'll figure out what comes next. After she left, I stood at my window one last time, looking out at Lake Michigan. This view had been my constant companion through the hardest months of my life. I'd stood here the night of the divorce, the morning after Rebecca showed up at my office. Countless evenings of rebuilding and rediscovery. Tomorrow, I'd wake up in Seattle to a different view, a different city, a different chapter. But I was taking something important with me. The knowledge that I could survive hard things, that I could choose myself without guilt, that walking away from what hurt me wasn't weakness. It was the bravest thing I'd ever done. My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Proud of you, big brother. Go show Seattle what you're made of. Then one from Marcus. Safe travels, man. Chicago will be here when you get back. And finally from Sarah. Just got home. Already missing you. Go be brilliant. I looked around at the boxes, the empty walls, the stripped-down space that had been my refuge and my recovery room. Then I picked up my phone and typed a response to all of them. Thank you for everything. The sun was starting to rise over the lake, painting the water in shades of gold and pink. A new day, a new beginning again. But this time I wasn't running from something. I was running toward it, and that made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.